to Cannes 2019. My name's Stefan Bardega. I'm the president for iProspect EMEA, and we are going to spend the next 30 minutes talking about the evolving commerce landscape and the strategies and tactics that lead to success in this really evolving area. And just for a little bit of context, it's worth noting that still 80% of all commerce transactions happen in the traditional offline world. But where it's super interesting is in the online world, which is only 20% at the moment, but that is still a $4.2 trillion opportunity. And importantly for us in this discussion today, it's growing at 5 times the pace of the traditional channels. And this creates, obviously, both challenges and opportunities for brands and marketers alike. We have opportunities. We've never had lower barriers to entry to set up an online commerce function, technologies like Shopify enabling us to get these up and running at low cost and very fast. But we also, in this evolving landscape, have many challenges to address as well. If you look at the marketplace environment, this is enormously dominated by 5 of the top global players. So if you add up Tmall, JD.com, eBay, Amazon, they account for about 88% of all marketplace transactions globally. So it's no surprise then that we find ourselves in a situation with this changing landscape that this is marketers' number one challenge is to get their e-commerce strategy landed over the next 2 or 3 years. So that's what we're here to discuss today. It's the tactics and strategies that make for a successful commerce strategy in this changing environment. And we have assembled 3 of really the kind of top experts in their field today to help this discussion along. So we have Martin from Google, we have Ashley from Instagram, and we have Arthur from Pinterest to help navigate this discussion. And to help orientate this discussion, I would like to reference a report that iProspect is launching today, which is called Data-Driven Commerce. This is the report. It's a large report that you can download off the iProspect website. And we surveyed over 100 brands globally in many different categories. And what we've been able to do through this research and this report is kind of codify some of the key success strategies for brands looking to navigate this complex environment. And we found kind of 4 key pillars, really, to success. The first one is understanding your availability strategy, so which platforms to make your products and services available on. The second one is findability, so how do you ensure that when a customer is looking for your product and service, it comes to the fore. The third is buyability, how do you increase the conversion and extract maximum value at the point of sale. And the fourth one is repeatability, which is more about post-sale. How do you increase the value of your customer relationship? So this is how we wanted to orientate the discussion. And so I guess let's start with availability. So we have an incredibly complex landscape, new technologies and platforms emerging all the time. How should brands be thinking about their omnichannel strategy, and what kind of things are you seeing that make a successful omnichannel strategy? Martin, should we start with you?
Very happy to. Thanks for having Google on the panel, and congrats on the report, a very comprehensive, I believe, 88-page overview of the e-commerce landscape. So well done on that. I think you're right in terms of digital has fundamentally shifted consumer behavior, right? And it starts with the consumer. If you think about the last 2 decades in terms of how we all shop and how we all go about researching, finding inspiration, etc., it's fundamentally changed. And so it's hard to deal with as a brand, as a retailer, as somebody in commerce. How do you deal with all those different touch points? Might be interesting. We recently looked together with a research company with permission of some individual users at individual user journeys. And when you look at somebody searching for makeup for sensitive skin, for example, that journey takes over 55 days with hundreds of touch points across both the physical and the digital world. And When you're talking about an omnichannel strategy, though, I think the point you made about 80% of actual physical transactions happen on the high street. So I would be laser focused on how do you connect the physical and the digital world. And so how do you think about the influence that digital has on physical world? When we look at queries on Google, we've seen a 3x increase in just the last 2 years in queries for near me or open now, where users are using digital means to find local, nearby availability of products, goods, price comparison, etc., etc. And so how you tap into that, I think is critical for marketeers on two levels. Firstly, I think it's the measurability of it. So really understanding the digital influence on physical sales. And so at Google, we have products such as store visits that allow you to actually get a good read on the percentage of users that were exposed to an ad and consequently went into a physical store. So you can start to understand that much better. And secondly, then start to make and take action on that and make decisions on the back of that. And so start thinking about, well, where do I surface local availability on platforms such as Google, which Google Shopping allows you to do, but also start to think about if somebody is within 50 meters of a store, do I treat that user different to somebody that is sitting at home on the sofa? And I think as marketeers, you have the tools now to both measure it and then take action on that. And I think that's critical when you think especially about an omnichannel strategy.
Yeah, and obviously the Google array of platforms and services is extremely rich in intent, so you're kind of in a natural place to explore that with brands. Okay.
Yeah, thanks a lot again for having us. I think when we think about availability on Instagram, your point is very valid. There's so many different touch points to be thinking about as a marketer and a retailer in today's day and age. And one of the things that we try to encourage our partners to think about is where can you find the space where your audience is going to be most engaged, where you're going to be able to build the type of lasting relationship with your consumers and build actually a community around the brand you're trying to build. So to speak to the example you gave of, for example, if you're in the market to sell skincare to people who have sensitive skin, where can you find the space where you're going to be able to connect with that audience base the most efficiently? And so on Instagram, we see this happening a lot, where with a platform of over a billion people, but also a lot of people-based targeting, both for ads, but also in terms of the discovery mechanisms we have, even organically across Instagram. Add on the influencer community of a lot of leading, makeup personalities who are kind of authorities on a lot of topics. Finding a place where, you can kind of get that all in one and actually build a community around your brand, we think is a really effective way to think about how are you optimizing where you're having all your touch points and driving sales.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And Arthur?
Thanks for having us on the panel. Pinterest is really excited to be here. When we share and talk about availability, I think to build on both of your points, we want to talk about mental availability of when and how brands actually engage. On Pinterest, we are the home of inspiration, and I know you've used that word as well. The idea of understanding what people's interests are, but not necessarily the specific brands that they're actually wanting to connect with just yet. This idea of discovery and being able to navigate one's taste and one's personalized profiles, and then have content resonating back to them that is relevant to their individual taste, is actually mentally available in that brand connectivity space. We have actually great products to ingest catalogs and actually enable you to shop a pin. We call it shop the look, or shop your boards. If you've created a collection of items that then our algorithm will digest and understand, okay, if you've liked this style of furniture or clothing, these are the shopping features and products that you can purchase moving forward. But I think mental availability is the first point of purchase, first point of conversation, where you really want to be understanding that not everyone is ready to buy immediately. There's a journey that they still want to go through, even though that journey and that funnel, we all know, is condensing quite a bit.
So I think it's interesting, right? Because you have clear differences in terms of the platforms and the kind of the positioning, which obviously then informs kind of how brands should be thinking about aligning their kind of channel strategy. But one thing that seems consistent is to have a customer-centric kind of approach is the way to circumvent some of the complexity of the evolving landscape, right? So that kind of makes a lot of sense, I think. But it's not always the way that brands and businesses are approaching this. They're quite often thinking about, I need to be on this platform, I need to be on this platform, rather than a customer-centric approach. So if we think then moving on to findability. So once a brand or a business has established the portfolio of channels that they're going to be in, what are the strategies and tactics that you're seeing to ensure on your platforms that their product or services are made available at the point of intent or interest from a customer perspective? So Ashley, should we kick off?
Yeah, happy to start here. When we think about findability at Instagram, particularly because of where we sit in sort of the discovery journey and inspiration journey, to use a word that we've been using, we actually sit a bit further up the intent spectrum. So we think, it's important for brands to be thinking about even before the consumer's at the point where they know the specific product that they want or the specific brand that they want even. Just when they're actually kind of in the consideration, maybe she's looking to shop a dress for a certain event. At that point, how do you make sure that you enter yourself into that consideration set? And so a lot of what we're focused on trying to help brands do is find ways to be in that sort of discovery phase of that journey. How do you make sure you're available and showing up when she's just kind of starting to embark on that path?
So you're trying to effectively collapse the funnel, I guess, between inspiration and purchase in a way.
Correct.
Creating a new opportunity.
Correct.
Okay.
And what we find on Instagram that is really successful today is what we like to call serendipitous shopping. Right now, we like to say a lot, people come to Instagram for their close friends and family, but a lot of time they stay for their interests, and interests often are products and businesses that they fall in love with on the platform. And so you have people coming for this rich mix of friends, family content, but then they also happen to stumble upon a bag that they want to buy. And that's very serendipitous in that way. They're not necessarily even coming to the platform to shop. And we're starting to move into this direction with our investments in our Explore tab and just generally with shopping on Instagram, where we're kind of moving down that spectrum of now she's starting to come maybe even to shop with the intent to shop.
And that's interesting. Maybe leads us on to you, Arthur, around if you're the inspiration platform. So talk to us a little bit about your perspective of Pinterest on this.
Yeah, I think I'm going to build on narratives here, and the idea of findability also has to be warranted in the visual nature of the Pinterest platform. We are a visual discovery engine, and frankly, the picture actually speaks more than 1,000 words, right? Sometimes you don't exactly know what you want and what you're interested in, but when you see it, you know you love it. And it is that use of the image that I think is so magical on the Pinterest, what we call the rabbit hole, right? This idea of, oh, that's interesting to me. And off of that image, our algorithms then offer you further suggestions where you can say, if you like that, you might like this. If you like that, you might like this. And this visual discovery allows you to finite and formulate your own personal preferences and tastes across interests that matter. The second thing that I think differentiates is the fact that you can save content to a profile and build a board that essentially is a reminder or of a curation of your own interests. And off of that, you'll learn a lot more about what is interesting to you in terms of the visual nature of people engaging. It is important to know that the innovation of visual discovery and visual searching is basically the predominant area where we're focusing on, understanding that every image is going to be a basis of a search query, right? We can dissect every image and say, you know what? Tell me a little bit more about that couch, or that chair, or that sweater, or that travel destination, or that food recipe. And off of that visual understanding and dissection of that image, we then enter into another search journey that kind of further goes down the funnel.
So you raise an interesting point there, which for brands who are trying to manage and create an optimized customer experience, which is that if the algorithm is making the decision over what to surface, when to surface, to whom, what are the implications then on findability for the brands that are wanting to make sure that their products and services come to the fore on Pinterest?
Yeah, I think we have to speak of the most important word, which is relevancy. Right? There is an absolute relevancy when I know your personal styles and I understand and have digested retailers' catalogs of products. Then just by simple association of visual cues, I can say, oh, you're into modern furniture versus classical furniture. And that relevancy allows not just an algorithm saying, oh, I'm into furniture, but I'm into this specific type of furniture. And visually, we're dissecting the web's images to make those associations.
And again, that comes back to the customer experience and customer-centric kind of strategy rather than just trying to game the algorithm. Obviously.
It all revolves around the user's interests, and more the interests, their personal taste profile against those interests.
Yeah. Okay, great. And Martin?
Yeah, at Google, I guess we're fortunate to have a number of platforms that sort of go across that journey, right? So I think, yes, there is huge purchase intent on Google itself, and so, you know, making sure you're there when somebody is ready to buy is one part of it. Increasingly, that's through the shopping format, where you show images and pricing and local availability as part of that. So I think the bottom of the funnel. But then you think about a search property such as Google Images, for example, where about a third of all the queries we see on Google Images actually is product and shopping related. So, you know, that's where people go as part of that inspiration journey and using it to curate and to get ideas. And so we're increasingly thinking about how marketeers can show up there, with some betas live in the US with shoppable ads on images. But also think about YouTube as an engine for inspiration a bit higher up. We opened Pandora's box on beauty, I think, but what an amazing industry. And sort of you look at those journeys, as we alluded to, you know, on YouTube, just how-to videos around how to apply makeup, or, you know, how to look natural in makeup, or how to have different ways of doing your eyes with makeup. That's quite amazing as just an engine to educate yourself as a user. And so, do you want to be there, right? Do you want to be there as a brand? I think you want to be there early on. And so brands like Sephora think about, you know, how do they create the how-to content so they can be relevant in that moment. So I completely agree with the visual aspect. I think the other aspect is, of course, is voice increasingly as well. So on the one hand, you know, text is what we really got used to, but image, what a more intuitive and what an amazing intuitive way to shop. And I think it will increasingly also become the input mechanism. So the camera on your phone as a consumer will be more and more the search bar, if you like, where you simply hold up the camera and then I can very quickly figure out what you're wearing, where you bought it, etc. Or as we're walking out on the street, what restaurant this is, what their menu is, what their opening hours, what the reviews are, just simply by holding up the camera. I think that's quite an amazing and powerful way of shopping going forwards. But combine that with voice, which for some journeys I think is going to be revolutionary, especially in the slightly more commoditized space where it's just simple replenishment, etc. I think that's another route for brands to start thinking about how consumers are going to interact with them.
Yeah, and these are new things that brands have to get to grips with. We've done a lot of research into voice search, but the visual nature of shopping as well kind of, you know, opens up a whole new dimension to discoverability, and this is an important consideration for sure. So if we move on to buyability, in our report, this was the area where brands seem to be struggling the most. So many of the brands feel they've got a good strategy for identifying which channels they should be in, so the availability piece, a solid strategy for findability, whether that's through paid media or organic. But the area where they feel challenged is the final, the last mile, right? So the last bit of the conversion process. And so I think it would be great to understand from you kind of what makes what do you think on your platforms is a successful strategy for increasing the likelihood to make that final kind of purchase? Because I suspect it's quite different between the platforms. So we start with Arthur.
Yeah, I think we have to recognize that we've optimized in the past towards the transaction, the filtering, the get me to that automatic buy button. And we've lost the inspiration journey online, right? We've lost the opportunity in the serendipitous shopping experience. And I think bridging that as closely as possible remains kind of at the thesis of how we're bringing shopping to life. With that said, we have to recognize that there are fundamental pipes that have to be built. We're doing some in-house. On our retail categories, we've had the ability to ingest catalogs. From that catalog ingestion, we can create product pins. We can hotspot images to do shop the look. We can digest and analyze boards for shop your boards. A number of features that are kind of inherent in the product for categories like retail and apparel to start. For categories that are a little bit more non-endemic or not ready for that one-to-one relationship, we're working with third-party partners. We launched today, or actually Monday at Cannes, an extension to our Pinterest Partners program, and created a new pillar of shopping, where we're partnering with third-party providers to help us with feed ingestion, to help us with tagging mechanisms for categories that I'm passionate about, like CPG, where there's always a third-party retailer. Where and how can we encourage the carding of items to be fulfilled by other retailers that are not necessarily controlled in the Pinterest ecosystem? So seamlessly integrating the shop, but maintaining an eye towards inspiration and the idea that we always want to deliver a shopping journey that is not just transactional, but respecting of the journey that consumers want to go down, is kind of at the North Star of how we're building shopping.
That's great, but obviously a clear requirement of that is technological knowledge on the client side or the partner side to enable that integration.
And I think there are different verticals that are of a little bit more different maturity. And I think we're all learning together. I think the best partners are those that are saying, let's lean in and drive together. And I can speak to ideal partners like IKEA, where we're uploading their catalog and digesting dorm room images, right, as we're planning for the new back-to-school period, and saying, what does IKEA have to help you deliver that ideal dorm room? We're working with Overstock to help navigate your home. With Target across multiple of their categories. But that ingestion of catalogs enables and unlocks a whole lot of shopping features. For some verticals that are not yet ready to ingest catalogs and work in that one-to-one manner, we're finding partnerships, we're finding and building together to kind of go down that journey. But again, always keeping in mind that as the home of inspiration, we serve a different role in building that upper, middle, and then ultimately lower funnel action that is being condensed frictionlessly.
Sounds like some amazing stuff in the pipeline from a technology perspective. And I know at Instagram you've got some incredible plans to help accelerate the path to conversion. So can you talk to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think candidly, the way you characterized your findings on where the industry is in terms of the retailer perspective, that's quite frankly where we are as a platform as well, where we've very much nailed this use case of discovery and inspiration, but converting that into a purchase is something that we, quite frankly, feel a responsibility in partnership with a lot of brands to make that a lot more seamless. And so, we're seeing on our platform over 130 million monthly people are actually interacting with shopping tags on the platform. So people are finding things that they want to shop, they want to buy. And so how can we make it more seamless in that moment when you've stumbled upon something that you're really excited about or actively sought out something that you're really excited about to complete that purchase? And so one of the things we're working on with, we're a small alpha right now, but we're working on a native checkout solution, which is a very obvious thing for us to do to help with this viability completion of the funnel. And so with some great partners all the way from high-end brands like Dior to upcoming brands like Outdoor Voices and creator-led brands like Huda Beauty, we're experimenting here and we're seeing, can we move the needle here by making that a more seamless one-click purchase flow on platform?
And it sounds like a game changer when it's kind of rolled out globally across all the brands that currently operate on your platform.
We hope so. And, we at Instagram talk a lot about being very people first. That's one of our values. And this was very much born out of something that consumers were asking for. I'm finding things that I want to buy. Help me finish this purchase. Don't make it so hard for me to go through all these hoops and go off.
Yeah, make it as frictionless as possible.
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure. And at Google?
So a couple of things. I think the piece around first of all, I think almost everybody with a product is looking for a direct connection to the consumer more than they've ever had that before, right? So, if you think about, most of the big brands are thinking about how to build further build that direct-to-consumer business and sell more of their goods directly to consumers, whilst maintaining, I think, a very healthy channel strategy as well. We've worked with a lot of retailers on getting brilliant product data. That's what our whole shopping business is built on effectively, is just building out a huge catalog of product information. And I think being able to have accuracy on inventory, being able to give us all the attributes associated with those products is very hard to do, but I think it's critical if you're going to show up in the moments where a consumer is actually ready to buy a product, right? So I think that's to start with. I think for a fraction of users, though, I don't think being able to click through from a platform to a brand's website or to a retailer website is good enough, and I think that puts too many barriers and too much friction in front of the user in that instance. So understanding as and when it might be relevant to put a transactionable functionality onto Google, onto other platforms, I think is critical. So in the US, we got something called Google Shopping Actions, which allows you to purchase directly on Google platforms. And actually here in France, we're running a pilot, the first pilot outside of the US, with a transactional functionality within our shopping property. And so if that is successful, and if we can scale that to other platforms, whether that's display or video, then that becomes quite an interesting transactionable layer across our platforms that cuts out that moment of friction, right? And I think if you were alluding to some of the marketplaces, what have they done so brilliantly? It's remove the friction from purchasing, right? If you're an Amazon Prime user, it's so trivially easy to keep buying from Amazon. And so how do you compete with that as a brand, or how do you compete with that as a retailer, I think is critical. And I just, one thing that stuck with me is speed in experience there is everything, right? And so Jeff Bezos will talk about, their tolerance for latency is under a second. Right, and so for most brands, their websites load in 7, 8, 10, 15 seconds, and so by then users are gone. Right?
But I think this is super interesting, right? Because I think it feels to me like almost for the first time, the consumer expectation is ahead of technology now, because we have an expectation of one-click purchase, immediate. If I see something, I want to be able to buy it. And so it does feel a little bit like, maybe Amazon has taught us that this is the way shopping should be done, and the expectation is now set. And I think that maybe varies different by market. There's a geography thing there as well. But the expectation is definitely there.
Just on that, I don't necessarily agree with the fact that it's ahead of technology. I actually think consumers are adopting technology faster than brands and retailers and other commerce players are able to keep up with right now. Yeah. So I think the disconnect is between how quickly the brands and the retailers can adopt the technology that the consumers are adopting. And so I think the technology at large is there.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I mean, I think it kind of leads us on to the next bit, which is around the experience post sale or post conversion and repeatability. So we collectively all kind of spend a lot of our time thinking about how do you get the sale, how do you convert the person, how do you extract maximum value from the initial sale. What happens after that is super important, and in many respects actually more important than the initial sale if you're thinking about lifetime value and extracting maximum lifetime value out of a customer or your investment. And this is this is another area where I think brands are really struggling. So be keen to understand with your respective platforms how you think about repeatability and extracting maximum value from that initial interaction, however you define value, because value might be defined differently. So Ashley, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the brands that I see and we see on our platform do this best are the ones who approach this from a customer relationship and a long-term, broader relationship and community development standpoint. So I mentioned Outdoor Voices before as one of our native checkout partners. They do a phenomenal job of, not just having that initial goal of driving the discovery to purchase, but more broadly making you feel a part of a community. They have a whole saying around doing things, and if you buy something from Outdoor Voices, they'll go ahead and the brand itself will even DM you on Instagram, not for any purchase follow-up or customer support, but just to say like, hey, glad to see you in your OVs, like what class are you going to wear them to? That kind of relationship that you're building allows you to foster that kind of a connection where you can actually get valuable product feedback that then starts to feed into product development, and you have this nice cycle of really good fit with a community that becomes loyal to your brand.
It's about building trust as part of that.
Exactly, building trust.
It's an important part of the conversion process as well, not just what happens post-conversion.
Correct.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting chapter and an interesting conversation for Pinterest. We have in the past been often placed into a social bucket, but the reality is Pinterest is not a social as traditionally defined platform. We are a visual discovery engine, and frankly, the journey is a little bit more individualized and personalized. That's not to say that there's not community on the platform. The community is centered around interests. And we've got product features like Tried It, where if you can actually respond to pin and say, you know what, I've taken that trip, I bought that sweater, I've made that recipe, And this is kind of how I've executed on an individual basis. But as you relate back to brands, I think I build on Ashley's point here in that we understand who your consumer is, and if they've actually made a purchase, they're much more likely to stay engaged and re-engage with the brand, and or brands that are of similar nature and categories. So the retargeting ability, the delivery opportunities of act-alike audiences are very much part of a brand strategy in terms of finding and repeating and building consumer loyalty. Because at the end of the day, if a brand finds relevancy with consumers, that's going to build loyalty, and that loyalty will then ultimately transact into repeatability.
Great. And you, Martin?
I think it all sits in how you're able to deploy your customer insight, your knowledge of your customer. It's been alluded to on a few occasions. And so as Google, we're trying to help brands, one, make sense of the data that they have. So if you think about the data that a retailer might have from their till data in store to the website analytics to their loyalty program, etc., most of that lives in silos. And so being able to connect that up, we work with them both through our Google marketing platform as well as our cloud solutions to bring that all together, then build machine learning models on top of that to start understanding what are those customers, what do they really want, what are the propensity models you can release on that data to help you gain an understanding of, okay, what are the next steps in that journey that you want to take them through, and the next, maybe the next product or the next message or the next piece of inspiration. And so I think it's all about how do you organize the data, how do you build decision engines on top of it that will then allow you to, in real time, on an individual user basis, completely start changing the way that you engage with them. And that's not just through marketing, I would say, not just on the platforms, it's also the way that you personalize your own websites, maybe the way that you personalize your customer service. And that's, I think, where the really exciting developments are coming from, is the ingestion of machine learning and AI in how you can process that data, how you make it useful, real-time actionable, and then build experiences on the back of that are much more, personalized to the individual user.
Yeah, and I think the one thing that I would say feels consistent is that brands and businesses need to invest as much in what happens post-sale on the platforms as they do in the initial acquisition. So I think that would be a kind of a key takeout, I guess. From but it might manifest itself very differently depending on the platform.
Just a fun example I came across the other week. It's if you look at an online grocer, Ocado in the UK, who has sort of broken the mold in terms of online groceries. The way they use machine learning, for example, in their customer service department is, as opposed to doing first in, first out email processing in customer service, they're now able to release a sentiment analysis on the inbound emails. And as a result of it, they'll be able to reprioritize the way that they respond to those emails. So somebody in deep distress waiting for their order, or order running late, 20 minutes late, etc., it goes to the top of the pile versus somebody just saying, thank you so much, that was a great experience. And so it's small things that would make a huge difference in customer loyalty.
It's a tiny thing that somebody has to think about it, then they have to organize themselves to be able to deliver it. So, it makes an enormous difference. So final question, because I know we're short on time now, is all of your businesses are evolving at an enormously fast pace. And I think everyone would love to hear what plans you have in the future, what's coming down the pipe from your respective businesses, as much as anything, so that the brands that are listening or watching can start to prep for it, right? Because getting ahead of the curve is one of the key things. So Martin, can you give us some insight into the roadmap? Or not? We'll move on if not.
If there was a roadmap, I would give you that. But no, I think we touched on many of those things. I think for Google, it's about actually, it's not just about the bottom of the funnel, capturing the transaction or the intent when somebody's ready to buy. I think there's more and more emphasis on how do platforms like images or YouTube, but also search itself play a role higher up the funnel. And I think there are more and more formats coming down the pipe that will allow brands to tell their brand story and earlier on against all the queries that are not product specific. I think that's one big area. The second area, as we discussed, is the removing the friction from the purchase, and so building out the transactional capabilities in close partnership with retailers. We don't want to be a retailer, but we absolutely want a successful retail ecosystem to exist. And so I think the more we can help retailers remove that friction is critical. And then the third area is all around how we help deploy the customer data and ingest that with our own insight into customer data to really help brands tell personalized stories, not just through marketing, but also on their own platforms.
I think for Instagram, probably 3 areas to watch out relative to commerce for us to be developing on in the coming years, and some overlap with what you mentioned for Google. The first is obviously removing the friction. So that I talked a bit about this alpha that we're in with the native checkout flow, and we'll be expanding that as quickly as we can. Responsibly, we want it to be a good experience for all the brands. So we'll be expanding that beyond the United States, where it's limited to today, as quickly as we can. The second is around what we've talked about, moving up the intent spectrum. For us, it's actually down the intent spectrum because we sit in a very serendipitous space today. And this concept of being able to have what we like to call a personalized mall type of experience, but on digital, that we think hasn't been super captured in a digital space the way it has traditionally in brick and mortar. And we think we can do even a better job with the personalization based on what we know about you on your Instagram, based on your Instagram behavior. And the third is one we haven't talked a lot here, but it's one that's huge on Instagram, and I think big for a lot of brands and retailers to think about going forward, is the role that we're all going to see influencers or creators play in trust building, but also in terms of feedback loops and understanding and community building for brands. It's something that's very big on Instagram, and we're leaning into that a lot. With most early days is allowing creators to actually tag brands and being able to shop brands via creators' posts. But that's just step one of kind of a bigger journey that we'll be going down with both creators and brands as a broader ecosystem.
Yeah, Pinterest continues to grow. We're in 30 plus countries organically, but we're in 19 countries on a monetizable basis. So just introducing the opportunity for brands to engage with consumers based on their own interests is probably job number one. Job number two is to further develop our SMB categories, right? We do well with large brands, large manufacturers, but self-service models and small DTC brands that want to engage with a relevant audience, we want to do a better job in helping them onboard and leverage the service. And then third is shopping. I think all of us are recognizing that inspiration is a wonderful place to be, but understanding one's tastes and profiles and connecting with the brands that can get me to where I want to go requires some sort of commerce engine. And we do believe that the camera is the new keyboard. And that camera functionality and digesting the visual world around you is going to condense that shopping journey while bringing incredible value to our end consumer.
So I get the sense from our discussion that we're really only 1% done on this commerce journey, although we might be taking e-commerce as 20% of the overall market. So I just wanted to say thank you, a massive thank you for this, because I think there's been an incredible amount of honest, open insight from you all. And then just to say, as a parting thought, that if you're interested in finding out more about the iProspect data-driven commerce report, you can download it from iProspect.com. And thank you again to our panel members. It's been a great discussion. Thanks.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.